Well, here I am in all my splendor. Uh, yeah, if this passes for splendor, I think that we've already lost the war. But I shall persevere, as Chief Dan George said in The Outlaw Josie Wells, we shall endeavor to persevere, whatever that means. And of course, it meant something completely different to the civilized tribes than it did to the United States Army. That's usually the case. Uh, we're in the book of the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 8. We're still in the message in the temple gate, which was the third sermon that Jeremiah preached. Uh, this is in around 600 BC, just before the final push of the Babylonian captivity, which there would be two more. There would be two more incursions, each one getting worse than the one before. The first incursion by this time has already happened. And by this point, Daniel and Ezekiel are probably in Babylon at this point. Now, we left off at verse 15, and that was about the results of the false prophets, the prophets who prophesied falsely, the priests who ruled by their means, the princes who were terrible pastors over the people and just, committed adultery and stayed drunk and were greedy and took bribes and stole from the common people. And all the ruling class, the merchants, the money changers, the big landowners, right up into the court of King Josiah in the beginning. But now good King Josiah is dead. And we have either the end of the rule of Jehoiakim or the beginning of Zedekiah. But Jehoiakim was wicked. Zedekiah was gutless. In the end, the result is the same. You see, if you're so wicked that you do the wrong thing, that's one thing. But if you're not especially wicked, but you let yourself get talked into the wrong thing, it may not be as bad as the wicked man, but the result is the same. I've made an argument for years that old King Ahab, he was he was no great shakes, and he was evil. Uh, I don't think he would have been half as bad as he was if he hadn't have married that witch from Tyre. Good old Queen Jezebel, because she brought the Baal worship and the prophets of the groves. But Israel, the northern kingdom at that point, had already gone off into idolatry, and now they've gone off into captivity. Did I say captivity? Is that where your cat holds you captive? Captivity? We don't have any cats. I've put my foot down in my old age. I don't want no cats in the house. I just don't have patience for it anymore. I used to say it was okay when the kids were little. Well, the kids are gone. No more cats in the house. We got a dog. Don't need a cat. Now, and especially now that we live in town, I have no use for a cat because, I don't even need a mouser anymore. I think I just lost my audience by insulting all the cat people. If you love cats, more power to you. God bless you. Jeremiah 8. Yesterday we camped all day on one verse because, like I said, it is what we're viewing as the result of the false priest that was prophesied by the prophets, taught by the priests, welcomed by the landowners and the ruling class, encouraged by the princes in the king's court, because they didn't want their prosperity to end, even though they saw it disintegrating, deteriorating, vanishing before their very eyes. It all began with the temple, the temple, the temple, and the doctrine that God would surely not destroy Jerusalem because that's where the temple is. That translated when Nebuchadnezzar's army is in the land now and taking defense cities, and has already came and, quote, negotiated a peace with Judah that has left the puppet king Jehoiakim on the throne, who had to pay tribute, who was a vassal king. Basically, his position was as a tax collector for the king of the Chaldeans. But he got to keep living his rich life, eating the fat of rams, having his harem and all that stuff, eating the good of the land while the people starved. And they cried peace, peace, when there was no peace, when the enemy was already in the land. And this is just a continuation of God explaining to and through Jeremiah to the people of Judah their judgment, why they're being judged, and what their judgment is going to be. Yesterday, verse 15, we looked for peace, but no good came. For a time of health, but behold, trouble. Their prophets had been, and teachers and rulers have been telling them everything was going to be okay. Well, if everything's okay, then how come we don't have anything to eat? If everything's okay, how come our money's worthless? If everything's okay, how come they have to ration bread? If everything's okay, how come everybody except the king's palace is on short ration and broke? See, money is worthless when there's nothing to buy. Their prosperity had bought them gold, but if there was no wheat to buy, if there was no oil to buy, if there was no wine to buy, what good was the money? We're learning that, and we'll learn it. I think I will miss most of it because I'll be in heaven. But we'll see that here soon, what that looks like. We looked for peace, but no good came. And for a time of health, and behold, trouble. Now we pick up today. And here's where we know that the war is getting close to Jerusalem. In verse 16, the snorting of his horses was heard in Dan. The whole land trembled at the sound of the neighing of the strong ones. For they are come and have devoured the land and all that is in it, the city and those that dwell therein. There was a city that Dan took, and its name was Laish. And their family of Dan, the tribe of Dan, took this area. And it was on the Mediterranean coast, south by west of Jerusalem. And that's where they settled. Good morning, Chris. And that's where they settled back during the time of Joshua and the judges. As a matter of fact, Samson had come from the camp of Dan. If the enemy's horses are in Dan, that means they've taken Laish, which is one of the fenced cities. And we learned from 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles that's exactly what happened. Because of rebellion in Jerusalem, in paying their tribute to Babylon, they're starting to feel the crunch now, and the enemy armies are coming. They can hear the horses of the enemy in Dan. That means Nebuchadnezzar uh, has floated boats down there and taken the coastline there just north of Philistia and are invading from the sea. Also, in far north Israel, of the old kingdom of Israel, which was taken captive, the northern kingdom, which was taken captive over 100 years before by the Assyrians, there was an outpost, a town named Dan, almost to where modern Armenia is now. And it could be that they're falling there, but either way, no matter which way you look at the Dan he's talking about, you got the approaching army of the Chaldeans. Because Dan in the north, the town of Dan in the old northern Israel, is already occupied and conquered by the Assyrians, and now the Babylonians have conquered the Assyrians. So the Babylonians are the world power now, and they're marching, bringing their armies forth toward Jerusalem. In previous verses, we see the people fleeing from the countryside and fleeing the fenced cities and coming back to Jerusalem because the enemy is taking control of those defenced cities, the fortress cities. But Dan is close. Dan is close to the city of Jerusalem. It's not that far. And they could hear the enemy's horses there. The strong ones, the ones that devour the land, the ones that take the city, the ones that dwell therein. And God says, it's getting close, and this is what I'm going to send upon you. This is part of your judgment. And verse 17, for behold, I will send serpents, cockatrices among you, which will not be charmed, and they shall bite you, saith the Lord. I'm even going to turn the scorpions and the spiders and the snakes, and we're going to turn them on you. To torment you because of your sin. I think of so many parallels, and that's part of what this series is about. It's talking about the parallels between ancient Judah and the United States and what we're going through right now. They heard the snorting of the horses and Dan, the sound trembling from the neighboring, and the neighing of the strong ones. I listen, and we can hear, we can see, and understand that China is encroaching upon our sea lanes. And if they can do it in the China Sea and in the Indian Ocean and in the South Pacific, why can't they do it to Hawaii or Guam or California? We hear it happening. We can tremble at the sound. What about the open border where millions of we don't know who they are coming over the border? And there's going to be terrorists among them. There's going to be ISIS and Taliban and Hamas and Hezbollah. And they're going to have weapons. And there's going to be mass destruction and fire in the streets of the United States from these God haters. Their God, the devil, is directing them to do this. They'll come. We should be hearing that just like they heard the snorting of the horses. Dan. We can hear it. We can feel it. We know it's coming. And then we can see the serpents, the snakes, the little creatures, the crawling and creeping things. That's representative of all uncleanness in the Levitical law, and dangerous. They won't be charmed and they'll bite you. See, you can't charm terrorists. You can't negotiate with somebody who's determined to kill you. There's no negotiating with terrorists. We've seen them. They just keep going until you kill them. There is no reform of a terrorist. They're completely irrational. They're driven by Satan, and they're unreasonable. You can't say, "Hey, we'll give you a bag of flour and a goat. We'll take care of your mother. We'll find a husband for your sister. We'll find you a wife. You can be a citizen." And he'll spit in your face and blow up the Haji vest. When people don't care about life, they don't care about their own life. They sure don't care about yours. Not when they chop the heads off of babies and pull babies, unborn babies out of their mother's womb, when they rape women in front of children and then kill the children. No, people are animals, and they need to be treated as such. You can't negotiate with them. You just need to kill them where they stand. Blood and fire. You can pray for them while you're killing them, but if you want to live, you will have to kill them. No other way. Because they're trying to kill you. Remember what Golda Meir said. When she was in charge, she was the prime minister of Israel the last time this happened. It was the Yom Kippur War, 1973. I wrote extensively about that in Another Such Victory for you guys that read it about the Yom Kippur War. You can't negotiate with someone who wants to kill you. You just have to stop them. That's the only defense against someone who wants to kill you. You have to put them down. But since you can't charm them, they're going to bite you. See, here in the United States, we think that we can negotiate anything. We think that diplomacy will work. It won't. These vermin have to be killed, just like ISIS was destroyed. And just like Al Qaeda was destroyed. You have to hunt them down and kill them. And then their children rise up against you, and you have to kill them too. And then their children rise up against you, and you have to kill them too. There is no end to it. You have to kill people who want to kill you. Now, in the world to come, that won't be the case, because the King of Kings and Lord of Lords is coming. He's going to reign on the throne of his father David, and there will be peace on earth because he will enforce peace on earth. He will rule with a rod of iron. The law will go out from Zion. His name is the Lord Jesus Christ. He was a Jew. He is a Jew. He is the son of Abraham. He is the seed of the woman. He is the seed promised to Eve. He is the risen Christ. He is the Son of God, and he's returning to judge the quick and the dead and establish his kingdom here on earth. If you don't believe me, that is your choice. You have every right to be wrong. This is a free country. You can hold on to your opinion if you want to. It doesn't bother me at all. Verse 18. When I would comfort myself against sorrow, my heart is faint in me. I don't find any comfort. I try to be comforted because of the things that are going on, but I can't. I can't be comforted knowing that terrorists are coming across the border, and we got millions of people that we can't even find. Don't know where they are, but they came across the southern border. My heart is faint within me when I think about the war in Hamas. when I think about all the innocents that'll have to die because their masters, the Hamas government, so-called government in Gaza, are determined to let all those civilians die. Did you know that the people who run Gaza don't even live there? They live in Turkey or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or someplace like that. They're all rich. I promise you that the leaders of Hamas are not the big cheeses of Hamas. They're not in a tunnel under Gaza City right now being shot at. They're in a hotel or a luxury apartment, Qatar or Paris, France, or something like that. They're not there. They're not on the battlefield. No, they're letting other people get killed in their place so they can make speeches and raise money. And they're not interested in peace. They want the destruction of Jerusalem. It's in their charter. All Jews must die. Israel must not exist. It must be a Palestinian homeland from the river to the sea. That means no Israel. Talk about a two-state solution all you want to. The Palestinians, the Iranians, they will never, ever, ever accept a two-state solution. Well, that's why nobody's talking about it right now, like the more, what we call the more moderate Arabs, like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and some of the other ones that that are afraid of Iran. So they've kind of forged closer ties with us. And until this episode on October 7th in Gaza, we're forging new and better relations with Israel. You see, they would accept a two-state solution, but not Iran, not Iran's proxies, which would be Gaza or Philistia, or Dan, the West Bank, which is really Judea, which is really Samaria and Galilee, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Syria, Turkey, Russia. Russia's not Muslim. Russia and Iran are the ones who are pushing all this. Russia wants the gas field in the Mediterranean in Israeli territorial waters. That's why Russia's involved. You know, you need to get a map out and look at it. And what would really be good is if you get a cartographic map where you could see where the mountains, where the valleys are, and where the rivers are, and then you could see what has to be done. And you can also see what Israel's enemies are going to do. Turkey gets a little tougher every day. Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's bad this morning. I go see the doc today at noon. Excuse me. Turkey gets a little bit closer to declaring war on Israel. And it's touchy for Turkey. They're a member of NATO. That makes them our ally. It's the only Muslim country who is in NATO. And there was much dismay and much misgiving and reservations about allowing Turkey into NATO. But at the time, it seemed, if not the only, the best way to preserve peace between Greece and Turkey, who have been fighting since the 400 BCs. And Turkey, and they didn't call it Turkey then. They called Greece the city-states, the Athenians, the Spartans, the Macedonians. but they have been fighting for 2,500 years roughly. And after the latest incursion and civil war and fighting over Cyprus, which both claimed, our diplomats thought the best way to keep the peace would be to put Turkey and the United Nations right next to Greece, because Greece was already a member. Turkey would have to disavow any military designs on Greece or Grecian territories. Greece would have to accept Turkish claims and quit fighting. So they meshed together, and they just essentially, in the end, nobody really gave up anything. They just quit fighting each other. So that is why Turkey is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, who we're bound to defend by treaty, and they're bound to defend us by treaty. But they are closer in practice. The nation of Turkey is closer in practice an ally of Russia and Iran and the Bashir regime in Syria than they are to NATO and, by treaty, the United States of America. So you can't believe a thing that Turkey says. They're as far as being an ally, their dictator Erdogan is a radical, and he is a dictator in his own country, and he has the backing of the radical Muslim factions in that country. You know, it is the so-called sane Muslims who are always trying to vote him out. But it doesn't matter who you run against. You know, it's a crooked deal, just like in Russia. No matter how many votes the opposition gets, they rig it up to where Erdogan gets more. The same way with Putin. No matter how much the opposition gets, Putin's always going to win because they control the voting. But at first, 3 weeks ago, Turkey said that Erdogan in Turkey said that Israel has the right to defend itself. Then they started calling for a ceasefire. Then they started calling for a settlement. And now they've threatened that they may have to get involved militarily to protect the rights, the legitimate rights of the Palestinians. Well, the Oslo Accords gave the Palestinians legitimate rights, gave them their own territory, gave them their own government, gave them a system to fund that government, and they cannot conduct their own business. The reason Hamas exists in Gaza is because they split off from the Palestinian Authority and they couldn't agree on how to function, and Hamas can't even get along with its own other brother Palestinians, what they call the occupied West Bank, which is actually Galilee. So when I read this, I comfort myself against sorrow, but my heart is faint. There's no comfort. Because if Turkey gets in this, and Yemen, another client of Iran, is lobbing missiles into Israel, way down there on the Persian Gulf, in northeastern Africa, Yemen. They can't feed their own people. You got lots of people starving to death in Yemen, but they can lob missiles at Israel. and at United States bases in Syria. Yeah, we have bases in Syria and in Western Iraq. Yeah, we have bases in Western Iraq. You know, when's one of those going to hit one of those carriers, huh? You comfort your heart, but your heart is faint. And the result is, in verse 19, behold, the voice of the cry of the daughter of my people because of them that dwell in a far country. All of our enemies are coming against us, so we're going to cry and wonder what's going on. Is not the Lord in Zion? Is not her king in her? I mean, don't we have a God anymore? Don't we have a king? Don't we have a God anymore? Don't we have a president? Don't we have a government? Don't we have an army? Do we have anybody who can make sense of the mess we're in? Do we have anybody loyal to the country? Why have they provoked me to anger with their graven images and with strange vanities? And God's answer to us. We have our gods and our vanities, our idols, and we turn to them and we do not trust the God who lives forever. Is not the God of Zion with us, and is not the Lord in Zion? Yeah, he's there all right, and he's pronouncing and executing judgment, just like he did on Judah 600 years before the birth of Christ. He is doing to the United States right now. The God of Israel is pouring out judgment upon us for our sins because we turned to idolatry and we went a whoring after other gods who are no gods at all but devils. We have sacrificed our children on the altar of convenience. We have sacrificed our children, both their bodies and their minds and their hearts. We have sacrificed them to the abortuaries. We have sacrificed them to the chemicals and the pills. We have sacrificed them to a godless society by letting government schools pound mush and nonsense into their little heads. And because of that, we have students on the campuses of the greatest, historically greatest universities in this country, where you got a bunch of people who don't even know what a Palestinian is or where Gaza is, couldn't find it on a map, demanding the destruction of Israel and the end of apartheid. Well, the last apartheid government ended before they were born. It was in South Africa. Israel is not an apartheid country. But these kids that have grown up on nothing but the sugar tit, they don't know any better, they don't know any different. Their communist professors have taught them that evil is good and good is evil. Woe unto them. The judgment is upon us. Idolatry, spiritual adultery, sacrifice for our children, and sexual perversion. The entire homosexual gender, the whole sexual perversion industry and agenda. It's all straight out of hell. We've all, as a society, signed on to it and said it's okay. We call evil good and we call good evil. and God is judging us for that right now. And if we don't support Israel now, that judgment is going to be even more severe than it already is. Because believe it or not, we get points for helping them. We always have. Is not the Lord in Zion? Yeah, he is. If he wasn't, they wouldn't be there now, because there's 14 million Jews and 400 million Muslim Arabs surrounding them, plus Persia, the Iranians. So yeah, I would say the Lord is in Zion. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That may be the only peace that you will have in your heart today, because the Lord is in Zion.